Do you know all the magical things that OTs do? If not, today you'll learn my 3 takeaways from the Sensory Project. Okay, friends, if I'm being honest, I feel a little bit scared and nervous and timid to do this, but why not? Let's start a YouTube channel. Hey friends, welcome back. And if you're new here, I'm MegAnne, the YouTube Parent Coach on Demand. And today I'm gonna share another 3 takeaways from my Instagram Live interviews. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, every Thursday over on my Instagram, right here, Be Kind Coaching, I interview someone who I follow that just brings me so much awesome inspiration. And I just invite them in and I ask them 3 questions: who they are, what do they do, and more importantly, why do they do what they do? And then we just engage in this awesome conversation together. My first one was with Magda, the Montessori mom from Denmark. So if you haven't watched it, go watch it here. And today I'm gonna share with you my second conversation, which was with 2 OTs from Idaho named Rachel and Jessica. And they have a podcast called The Sensory Project. When I started following The Sensory Project, I instantly connected to the way that they share awesome OT strategies, but these are strategies that are good for anyone. It's ways to help stabilize our internal drivers, meaning sometimes children run really high. They have a high running engine. Those are the children who like go, 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 go. And maybe they need something to help weigh them down, like a weighted vest or a weighted blanket. And on the flip side, sometimes children are running too slow and they need to do things that will help rev them up. After working in the preschool that I worked at for 5 years, I engaged with so many of these strategies. So when I found Rachel and Jessica and started watching what they were sharing, I instantly connected to it and I had to get them on camera to chit chat with them. And I want to share with you my 3 biggest takeaways. The number 1 thing I learned was that innovation is a necessity for inclusion. From starting a podcast to starting to build their own weighted items, something that really inspired me was that Jessica and Rachel were constantly looking for a way to serve their audience more and in a more accessible way. They saw problems and they were constantly looking for ways to fill that problem the best, constantly innovating, constantly changing. Something that we talked about in our conversation is the phrase, "This is how we've always done it," and how that is a marker for death. Like that is a marker for saying like, oh, this is where ideas go to die. If we're not constantly growing and constantly learning and constantly innovating, are we serving our families, ourselves, and our community the best? Number 2 is asking yourself the question, is this successful for everyone? And that piggybacks into finding a balance, and that balance is key. And balance doesn't always mean being perfectly balanced, but if someone is starting to take an idea and grow, maybe they need someone to help pull them down. Is this whole like response to the sensory process is that sometimes when we get excited or we have big emotions, we start to rev up and run really high, and we need either someone or something to help bring us down, and just constantly be asking ourselves, is this successful for everyone? And how this applies to parenting is that when we're going through this journey of raising children, we're going to start facing obstacles that just requires us to check in and say, hey, is this how I want it to be? Does this feel right to me? And maybe do I need to go and learn a missing skill so that everyone can stay successful? I asked them specifically about this, about how we know when children are in school, when maybe they need to go and get a sensory diagnosis. And something that Rachel shared and was strongly convicted in is just knowing that every single person has a sensory diet. Every single person has sensory needs. It's just, is your child's sensory needs starting to get them so distracted that now they're no longer successful? Are those struggles that they're facing keeping them kind of isolated and distancing their growth? And if the answer is yes, then maybe bringing in someone to help get everything back on track and get everything back to being auto-regulated is the key. And the third thing that I said a little bit a while ago, but is that everybody has a sensory diet. Oftentimes when I hear like sensory issues or a sensory disorder, it starts to like, when I hear it from parents, it starts to like shock them, and like it can be like this a shocking label. And really every single person has it. In offices, maybe you have fluorescent lights, if you've never heard it, and they have like this low hum all the time. Or some brains can just like auto tune it out. They're like, whatever, no business. But sometimes our brains get hyper focused on it and it can become so distracting. So just learning that every single person has a sensory need and a sensory diet, and just learning how to, I guess, best feed it to stay successful. And in the end, working with an OT or working with a coach or working with a therapist is just helping you find the answers that are right for you and your family. And the fourth bonus thing is that the Sensory Project has, one, they have an Instagram account. They have an awesome podcast that helps talk about all of these sensory topics in this like really in-depth way. And then the third thing is that they actually have an Etsy store where they create weighted vests, weighted eye masks, and weighted blankets. If your child has ever had to have a weighted vest, it looked very medical. It looked very isolating, and it was like your child would stick out like a sore thumb because she just didn't want it. Going back to finding that innovation is a necessity for inclusion. She and her mom went to thrift stores and bought jackets and jean jackets and like fleece vests and just started sewing in pockets for sandbags and building their own weighted objects that could be camouflaged into just everyday wear. And this is what launched this Etsy store as well, so that they started building and creating and handcrafting items that would go incognito in a classroom so that children aren't made fun of, they aren't isolated, they aren't kind of further at a deficit in this peer social group. And I thought that it was freaking fantastic. So I'll show you here kind of their podcast, their Etsy store, and their Instagram, and go and check them out. And if you have a friend who might need to hear this, make sure to share it with them, because that's number one way that this message gets spread, is by someone saying, hey, have you heard this video? Or hey, maybe you should go listen to this. And that's what I'm here to do, is just keep spreading the goodness. So thanks for listening, and see you later. Bye, friends. Do you have a sensory